What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Future Revolution. So today I kind of wanted to give you guys an update on where I'm going with Wolverine and start to give you guys that good, the bad, the ugly. Not a whole lot of ugly with the character. I'm going to be perfectly 100% honest with you. There's a lot of flexibility in what you can do with Wolverine, whether you want to play with him in PvE or PvP. I think the place that he's going to shine the most, however, is going to be inside PvP, especially in squad battle and I want to say like dimension duels mostly, but let's take a look at the character overall and break it down and see what I'm talking about here. Can't believe I skipped out of there. So let's take a look. So right now you can see I'm at about 1.3 million power for my Wolverine, and that's mostly because I got lucky. So let's take a look at why. So there's a couple of pieces in here that I want to talk about. First of all, kind of give you guys an overview before I break down into some things, but let's jump right on in. So I think that there's going to be some high viability for Wolverine to be both in PvE content and PvP. Let me explain. Basically, I think inside, because of Wolverine's ability to single target DPS on characters so well, I think he's going to be really, really good for Blitz and Raid. That's just the truth of the matter. He's probably not going to do so well on like AoE type environments where you're looking like Spec Ops and stuff like that, like Invasion. I don't think he's necessarily going to shine inside those modes. And so you're not really looking at him shining inside Blitz or Raid, for instance. But will he be good in places like Dark Zone and Most Wanted? Places like that or whatever? Yeah, I think that he will be good, so there's a lot of flexibility, but I think the place that he has his biggest ability is going to be in PvP. For that reason, I'm going with a couple of costume options here, and I'm going to break those down for you guys, right? So looking at his costumes overall, if you're going for non-regional set pieces, I don't really know anybody, even if you're free to play, there's not a whole lot of reason for you to be going for these non-regional pieces, to be 100% honest with you, especially this update and the previous update for Mighty Thor, Jane Foster. They gave away so much. I literally rolled into another 50 tickets that basically allowed me to pull some stuff. So let's talk about it. This doesn't include the rest of the giveaway stuff that they're giving, but let's jump in here and let's talk about it. So New Stark City is the set that they're giving everybody, and you get that attack, crit damage, and ultimate skill level. So it's not a bad thing necessarily to boost up that ultimate skill level, because Wolverine's ultimate skill level is good. So if you want to stick to that as a basic level PvE build, then go ahead, have at it. It's not going to hurt you any way, shape, form, regard, right? Especially because, like I said, this New Stark City basically has the attack, crit, damage skills. So now it's important to understand what you're getting when you look at the Swift Strike class skill. Basically, the main thing that you're getting from the Swift Strike class skill is that mark for target that's inside of the abilities. So that's essentially what you're getting there. I don't know if that's worth enough for an investment into that, so I wouldn't basically look at it. Midgardia is basically giving you the Adamantium Claws class skill, and these are some of your heaviest hitting abilities that you're going to have inside your kit. There's probably about 2 or 3 of them inside there that makes this really probably worthwhile, not to mention it has attack and crit damage. So if you're looking at PvE builds, this is probably going to be it for you, right? Sakaar has attack, crit damage, and Evolve Hunter class skills. These skills literally track really well. They apply Laceration, I believe it is, and the Adamantium Claw ones pass Rupture, right? Or I might be a little bit off on that, but let me explain that in short fashion when I go. I'm not going to try to go too deep in it, but let's talk about this, right? So Sakaar is a really good set to basically throw on Wolverine, depending on which one that you go bread and butter in. If you go Evolved Hunter class and you find you got more skills there, I suggest that you go overall with the Evolved Hunter and probably go Sakaar. Otherwise, go Midgardia. I plan on trying to build into both of these depending on what I get. So think about it that way. I don't really find Hydra Empire necessarily to be all that useful. I wouldn't use any of Swift Strike class skills. Essentially, you know, they're not really standing out enough for me that I would essentially use the Hydra Empire the way I would before. Dark Domain, however, has attack, defense, pierce, and Adamantium Claw class skill level +6. This is probably a really, really good one for you to use. Savage Shadowland has HP recovery, crit rate, and Evolve Hunter class skills. So if you can get these, like, this is like weird because like Savage Shadowland feels like the in-between gear piece from, you know, the regional set pieces. I know Savage Shadowland is technically a regional piece, but it feels like the availability of getting it doesn't really seem to hit that well for me. So this is why I always like pit it somewhere in between the regional and somewhere in between the special costumes, right? Special costumes, you're definitely going to go Rise of the East. It's got Scarring Whirlwind, skill level +7, Adamantium Claws class, skill level +7. So this is going to be a banger for PvP. It's going to be even good for you inside PvE, to be perfectly honest for you. Eyes of the Osiris is going to be the other one. Forward Momentum skill levels, plus the Evolve Hunter class skill level overall +7. Really, really good skills inside there. So those are the costumes essentially that I would take. If I was you, I would be taking a look at. Overall, for me, what I'm looking at right now is a couple of builds. I'm basically breaking down into the Dark Domain set for his PvP build, and then I'm probably going to go Midgardia or Savage Shadowland for his other ones. Now, I got kind of lucky on this, and a lot of your build might be dependent on which gear pieces that you do get and how those builds work out. And what I mean by that is, like, so for instance, I'll show you what I kind of mean by that. So like if I was to go in here, pull up my Dark Domain helmet, right? You can see I've got attack, crit damage, crit rate. That's a pretty good roll on the uniform. Can't be too mad about that. On the Dark Domain armor set, I've got attack, accuracy rate, and crit damage. That's a pretty good roll as well, right? You look at his Dark Domain gloves, however, and you're like, that was not so good. I could end up trying to re-roll that stat if I, chose to at another point. But, it's there. It is what it is. And then his boots, cooldown decrease, HP recovery, not so bad at all, right? So then when you start taking a look at what have I rolled for my free card events, because I really haven't rolled any costumes that weren't free from the tickets that they've simply given out over the events, and that's still a lot more to come. So, but depending on what gear pieces you may be in, you might be looking at like, I can't really roll those specific skills. I can't really roll that specific build because I don't have some of those pieces. For instance, like I don't have some of the Midgardia pieces to really trudge along with this. Like I've got some of the Sakaar set inside here for Evolve Hunter class skill levels, which is really cool, right? It's one of those other builds that has say, but I'm lucky enough that I've been playing the game as a veteran for a while, so I can dig into my inventory, my stash over here and say, all right, I'm gonna go purchase and use one of these costume pieces in order to get a Midgardia set. Hopefully it's something good. When you consider how you're rolling on sets, make sure that as you decide that you're going to nano out specific sets and stuff like that for your character, that's something that you're paying attention to. Is essentially like, hey, what's going on here in terms of the character, like what stats do I have, like attack, crit damage, and crit rate for Wolverine sitting on a full Dark Domain set inside my PvP build is perfectly great. I'll go into nanoing that set overall. Getting a Midgardia uniform piece, like if I was to go in here, like you can see this, that's fair stuff. What am I doing here? Where are you at, Midgardia? There you go. Rolling into like this Midgardia set, I've got 3 attack inside here and accuracy rate. That's not bad. I probably would just get ahead and nano into that uniform. But when I get something like these gloves right here, where it's got defense, dodge rate, guard damage decrease, critical damage, stats are just spread abundantly across the things where it's like, yeah, I can't make head or tail. I'm probably not gonna freaking nano fuse that. Like that's just, I'll probably wait to get something different before I start nano fusing those. That's just the truth of the matter, right? So let's take a look overall. That's how I'm building out my Wolverine. Let's take a look at that, right? So then let's take a look at the skills, because these are where it's going to be highly dependent upon what you're getting and what you're doing. One thing that I've noticed about Wolverine's ability from playing around inside the training grounds is that he seems to track really well. And I've used him a little bit inside Dimension Duels, but I'm really low level in terms of 1.3 million power. That's not a lot. He does very well in terms of tracking there as well. And he does some significant damage. One of the skills that you're definitely going to want to have up, I think is going to be key in every single build, is going to be Claw Expertise, Impaling Break. Now, that's not to say that the other ones on the window aren't necessarily good, bad, and different. It's just that this one has the least amount of cooldown and requires stamina, so you can have this up all the time. Essentially, what this skill does, notice is that it's a Swift Strike class skill. It inflicts the marked target status for 5 seconds, and it basically increases the next skill damage on a marked target by 30%. So basically it's allowing you to top off on that attack damage. So if you get something like in terms of your specialization where it's going to add 20, 50, 30 or stuff like that, you'll see those. This is basically when you mark a target, you're basically like 50% attack bonuses on them. So it's going to be something that you want kitted out, that you want to be using all the time. You can see this main stat over here that they were looking at, Scarring Whirlwind Bitter Wheel, is the one that I'm using from here. That doesn't mean that any of these other ones aren't good. I just like how much of the damage that is giving me with the cooldown times and the required stamina. Now, that doesn't mean, like I said, that any of these other ones are necessarily bad, right? They're not bad. It's just that what I'm looking for here is mainly the rupture status inside here. Like if I didn't mention it, I don't care about the attack damage on this one. I care about the fact that it's marking targets. On Scarring Whirlwind, what I'm looking at is damage overall for the amount of stamina that's required and the cooldown time. So if you look at like rage rotations, not bad in terms of damage, 25, 1, 28, and we got 19.6 and 33. I just find that the cooldown time on this one with the required stamina is probably there, especially since I'm going to try to spec into a build that decreases my cooldown time and hopefully gets me as much stamina recovery as possible. So I want you guys to think about that, right? Even some of his other ones is not necessarily bad. This one, I just think that the cooldown time and the required stamina max just a little bit too much for me overall. The good thing about all of these abilities, I can guarantee you, they're fucking landing. Wolverine is touching people. He is touching them up and he's tracking them down. He is an Evolve Hunter. Notice that Scarring Whirlwind is an Adamantium Claws class skill, so pay attention to those, right? Swift Strike, Claw class, Adamantium Claw. Another one of the abilities that I'm using is Champion. I'm using Untouchable, but that doesn't mean that any of the other ones in here aren't bad. I just like the fact that this one has a pretty low cooldown and a low required stamina, which means that I get to use this more. The reason why I care about that so much is because, like I said, I'm going to spec into Wolverine mostly for PvP, and having the avoids being targeted by enemies while moving with this skill, aka iframes, is pretty beneficial to me, right? That's what I want, the untargetable. It's the name changes so much in different games. Me playing through games, I just call these iframes. That's basically what it was. So he was untargetable by its invincibility frames, right? So those were the things that I was looking at. That doesn't mean that the other ones don't have invincibility frames, but you'll notice that when you look at those cooldowns and those required staminas, they're relatively high on the characters, which means that I don't have a lot of uptime on them. I'd rather have the low cooldown, and this time being that I won't have this up. So like for instance, let me give you my thought. Capture Prey, for instance, right, does the exact same thing in terms of avoid being target, and it also tracks him. It does 1,282 damage. This one does 640, right? So if I doubled up on this one, because I get to do it twice, that's 640 and 640, that's 1,280. So I'm basically at the same point right here, right? And you can see that looking at the 12.4 and the 22.8, that's roughly half of the cooldown, and it's also roughly half of the stamina that's being utilized here. So why would I use the 1,282 when I could use the 600, get the 640 damage and basically get the same amount while also getting the avoid targeted twice on the character for the one? See what I'm saying there? So that's an evolved hunter ability. So we see we can see basically we've got a target, hunter, and then we've got this. Now the important part about the Scarring Whirlwind that I also didn't point out here is that this ability applies the rupture effect, and rupture is important because it decreases the defense. And when you go into another skill, I'm not utilizing it, is like laceration, intrepid dash. It applies laceration. Now understand that this is the only skill in here that applies the laceration effect. So if you were going for a laceration build or a DOT, a debuff, basically build with Wolverine, you're going to want to utilize Intrepid Dash, right? Because it's basically going to be a rotation where you're going to say, hey, I'm going to mark my target, I'm going to cause rupture, and then I'm going to attack with laceration to get the most out of my ability. That's a debuff build, right? I've applied 3 debuffs to the character, to my opponent, basically through those skills. Realistically, I'm using champion right now because I'm doing that mostly for like it's a good ability that's going to be inside the build. I think whether or not it's PvP or PvE, I just decided to try to test out some things, so I'm playing around with them. Tony Bing did a video. I've watched Tony Bing. Go check out his videos. They're really good. I watched some of Godslave's play, and then I watched some of Wolverthor as well. Put out some information out there for videos, and I'm still playing around with them. I played around with them quite a bit inside of Training Ground, which is why I'm only at like 117 instead of sitting about like 119. But that Intrepid Dash is going to be pretty important, right? Next up, we get Forward Momentum. I really like this skill, mostly because it is applying tack damage, and you can see over here is that it's also giving me avoids being targeted, more iframes. So inside this ability, you see I've got 2 iframe abilities basically coming from champion and coming from Forward Momentum, right? Now, one of the abilities that, and notice that this is also an evolved hunter skill. So basically we've gone 2 evolved hunter, 1 adamantium claw, and 1 claw expertise, right? Now, Scarring Path, I don't like this ability. It's flashy, right? It's cool, but all of the abilities pretty much look like that, where they're like flashy abilities. But the problem is that in practice, these abilities don't seem to work. Like, what I mean by them is I've been playing Doctor Strange for quite a while, and I'm just irked at this point of long wind-up times for skills. The shortest wind-up time that he has, I think, is for this ability right here, Scarring Path, Air Rupture. But the problem is I see a lot of characters dodging through these, right? So it's not necessarily the thing that you want to consider is that it's going to stack Rupture on this ability. But the bad thing is that if I don't land the damn skill, then it's not going to stack Rupture, right? And then it just doesn't make it worth it to me. Like, so it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't make it work to me. Now, another one of the skills that I did notice that was inside the wheelhouse was Mutant Mentality, right? And so Mutant Mentality has a usability for both PvP and PvE. There are 2 specific ones that I want you to pay attention to inside here. That's 1, the morale boost effect has a 33-second cooldown, required stamina is 31, increases attack by 20% for 12 seconds, recovers ultimate gauge by 17.88%. So I wanted this because Wolverine does a lot around his ultimate ability for Berserker. And then if you look at infinite regeneration, recovers HP by 20% for 8 seconds, removes status effects from self, becomes immune to debuffs and immobility. So you can see the difference between the 2. Basically, you've got one ability here that could be used for both PvP and PvE. It's kind of the go-between, right? Depending on how aggressive you want to be. This one right here probably provides a little bit more of a kit type tool for you to stay alive, because you've got recovers HP by 20%, removes the status effects from self, and becomes immune to debuffs and immobility. So this is going to be good for you inside like Dimension Duels, right? It could also be great for you inside of like Alliance Omega War and in modes like that. It could still be good use for you inside PvE, though I doubt that you're going to see those the PvE where you're going to need to have that HP recovery or the status effects removed from you or becoming, you know, immune to debuffs. They're just not really needed there. The ultimate gauge recovery, probably a little bit more. And that brings us to the ultimate gauge recovery in here in a second, but let's take a look at Metal Defense. Now, I think this is going to be one of those slept on abilities, if I'm being 100% honest, and I really like it. It's inside the Swift Strike class skill, and is one of the reasons why you might want to take a look at the Swift Strike class skill. Now, this one's going to require a little bit of play, meaning you're not auto playing if you're using this skill, Metal Defense, right? So Metal Defense, basically all of the abilities are basically reflect abilities. If you played Marvel Future Revolution or Marvel Future Fight and you've seen the characters that do like true damage accumulation and stuff like that, that's essentially what's happening with these characters, right? With this ability, is that for every instance, you basically have something where Wolverine is absorbing the damage, and then he reflects the damage back or does something to them. So like Overwhelming Spin, you can see he spins at high speed to absorb damage, then pierces the enemy for a certain amount of damage, right? The tracking on them isn't so bad, so they're pretty good. You can see here he converts 500% of lost HP into additional damage, knocks back, stuff like that, right? You can see over here he's using Swift Strike takes Gar's damage to reflect, and then right after he takes that, he stabs right over there, right? And you see he's reflecting 286% of damage, decrease all damage received. And then over here, lastly, you can see one of my favorites, which is Metal Defense Dodge Slicer. Instead of actually reflecting damage, he basically takes a step behind enemies, gets his dodge rate up by massive numbers, right? It doesn't even care what your max values are, and he basically does some damage inside there. 120% increased dodge rate for 1.2 seconds. Now, I don't know that I necessarily care about this skill so much because of the damage value and stuff like that, but it's just a map movement function inside there that I really care about and that I really like. The other ones that I find more important are these two in the middle. Those are the ones that I think are going to be exceptionally well inside like Alliance Omega War or inside squad battle. So pay attention to those two abilities if you really want to do in there, because Swift Strike has its usability. And this is going to be your big problem inside here, is there's not a lot of ugly on this character. There's not. He is like the jack of all trade. He is the weapon that you want to have. He's your Gerber. He's your freaking bread and butter knife. He's like, your Swiss Army knife inside there. So like, that's what you're basically looking at with Wolverine overall inside there. So right now, some of the builds that I'm playing around with mostly rely around Adamantium Claws and Evolve Hunter. So you can see what I mean by this here is I'm basically using 3 Adamantium Claws class skills, and I'm using an Evolved Hunter and an Evolved Hunter, and then I'm using 1 Swift Strike class skill. Now I don't care about using the other abilities because I'm just this is how I'm currently playing it, and this is what I'm currently liking. Doesn't mean that I don't like the other ones. The only one that I could really see opting in for and opting out of is Intrepid Slash, and specifically Intrepid Dash, mostly for the benefit of getting off that rupture and then laceration. There is a time status on how long that is up and how long it's lasting. Now, if I go into that, it becomes a question of which ability are you going to take out in order to do it. I'd probably just go with taking out Champion and then just going straight up Intrepid Dash. And, that's basically what I'd probably do. If I'm being perfectly honest, I'd probably go with that and go with Multi-Slash or I think it was this one right here, Laceration Wheel. I did like this one. I think it does do some tracking on that one. I have to remember to take a look at it again. But yeah, so that's something that I'd look at going on to overall. Now, whether or not you go inside the tree and look at some of the other abilities, they're all pretty good. They're all great skills. Wolverine is like the master of all inside this game. I don't think we've had a character quite like Wolverine in this game yet, so he's really cool. So let's take a look at the specialization so you guys can see what I've done here. So essentially I've opted in to go with Swift Strike, which is Animal Instinct. Basically using Evolve Hunter class skills 3 times recovers the ultimate skill gauge by 15%. This is also another reason why I wanted to use the low cooldown times, because the more I use those Evolve Hunter class skills, the more I'm getting the cooldown reduction, right? So it's a good class skill in that it's giving me recovers my ultimate skill gauge, which is essentially what I want to be doing at all time, getting my ultimate skill gauge up, right? Then if you look at Swift Strike Precision Hit, it increases damage on a single target by 21%. A lot of the abilities that you're going to look at for Wolverine, especially when they show him inside that skill tree window, show it as if though my man is kicking ass, taking names by doing multiple hit targets. Realistically, in all actuality, when I played him inside of Training Grounds, he seems to single target DPS a lot. So my expectation is that's what it is. And that's why I'm saying I think that this is going to be a great PvP type character. He increases damage on single targets by 21%. So we got that one all the way maxed out. I'm working on some of the other ones. I also went with this one, Swift Strike X Factor. It increases attack equal to, at this point I'm at 24%. I think this maxes out at 30% of HP recovery, attack 100 plus 100 per 1%. So this is really, really good, right? Because basically you're getting that HP recovery stat up anyways, and you're going to try to max it out at the top end of it. So this is going to be good, right? Especially for Wolverine, depending on your build, whether or not you're playing PvP or PvE, I think it has some value. I think it probably more value in the long run against the HP recovery, but I think it the amount of damage that this could mean is just is a lot that you don't want to leave on the table. So like right now, I just don't find a way in what I'm trying to build towards to be like, yeah, I don't want to use these skills, right? You know what I mean? Like they are part of the toolkit here. Now, I'm also using Adamantium Claws Healing Boost, which absorbs percentages of the damage of the active skill, and the next skill as HP when using a Swift Strike class skill. So now this one is interesting, right? Because you can see that like the next skill as HP when using a Swift Strike class skill. So what I'm basically doing is saying I'm going to roll into the one ability that I have as a Swift Strike class skill, which is the mark for target, and then I'm gonna recover up to 15% of max HP per skill use. Now you could opt in for another Swift Strike class skill, and that would boost you up as well. So you can see what I'm saying there. Now you could switch out for this if you want to, because you don't have to absorb damage, and there's some other abilities inside here that are meaningful. Like for instance, using a target skill decreases the cooldown of the hunter class skills on feral focus. There are 3 other skills in here that I find to be PvP related, and they're probably going to be part of your PvP equip. And that is going to be Adamantium Claws, Enhanced Endurance. Using a Swift Strike class skill increases short range damage reduction. That's pretty decent, right? Especially if you're inside like PvP, you just want to get that damage reduction. Alliance Omega War, you want to get that damage reduction up. Decrease the damage received. Adamantium Claws Dead End decreases damage received by a certain percentage when dodge gauge is at 1 or below. You kind of get the point here is that you're basically going to have to control that character, not just autoplay, because the game's not going to use dodge for you at all. And then over here you got strategic moving. Using a dodge skill increases defense pierce by X% and debuff resistance by X%. So this is going to be one of those cool abilities, because when you do use your dodge skill and you make sure that you're rotating properly, you basically get a roundabout of defense pierce that's up all the time. So I think that the most this would go to is, I think it was like 30%, I think it was, or something like that. I can't remember the numbers, what it was, but basically those numbers go up, and you're basically no longer having to account for those inside of your defense pierce stat, because you're going to have that up the majority of the time anyways. You know what I mean? So defense pierce, but defense pierce is inside your PvP builds, right? So think about that one overall. Now there were other abilities inside here. I just really didn't like them, mostly because if you guys have been following me long enough, you know I hate situational abilities. Hitting an enemy whose guard gauge is at 50% or below increases guard damage by 10%. I don't like it. It's just, you know, it's one of those abilities that maybe if we were playing like, I think it was the Magneto Epic Invasion, this could have some viability or usability, but I just don't like it. It's too situational. You come over here, and this one is using Adamantium Claws class skills, increases all damage dealt to supervillains. Great PvE ability regardless of the upper limit for 8 seconds. Great PvE ability if you're fighting against supervillains, but then it just becomes wasted if you're not fighting supervillains, right? So it's just weird in that regard, right? I don't like the ultimate weapon. Berserker Rage becomes immortal for 2 seconds upon sustaining fatal damage, preventing HP from falling below 1%, and activates Hot Claws. Now, and it has a 600-second cooldown. So I'm not a huge fan of it. Very situational. How often are you going to really get it off? And then we have another ability that you could rotate in, because I am looking at it and I have to play with it, get some more orange, the fair whatever, the Convergium, which is basically deals 1% more X% more damage to an enemy in rupture state, and X% more damage to an enemy in laceration state. Damage to an enemy in rupture or laceration state can be stacked. So this is really cool, because I think this goes to the upper limits of 20 and 30. So basically, like in your PvP build, this could be one of those viable skills, especially if you go with the debuff kind of build where you're going to go mark target, rupture, and then lacerate. And as long as those are hitting really well, then you're going to be like off to the races on damage numbers. So this is one of the abilities that I got to play with. I don't have enough Convergium for this, and I'll probably end up putting this one into my PvP build overall, because I think that's where I'm going to go with the debuff for, is inside PvP, so that way I have that there. Those are the specializations overall. Don't find them bad. I kind of like them. My potentials, basically go straight for attack HP. On the first line, go straight for attack, the defense pierce, the HP. The defense pierce you can leave out if you're not a PvP player, right? And just straight up go for attack and HP. Come back to that later. Same thing with the third line. You know, total damage and HP recovery is probably where you want to go. You can leave out the defense pierce while you're working through. And then over here, I would specifically probably attack all three of these because they're all viable to you in terms of PvE and in terms of PvP. So I would go with those no matter what. At the upper end levels, hit up attack and HP automatically and come back to the defense. Defense just doesn't mean shit. So it's like, you know, it is what it is. In terms of Omega cards, this is going to be really weird to talk about Omega cards. I always find that that's a benefit overall for the game, but the Omega cards, like I've explained inside Marvel Future Fight videos and I've explained before, they're largely dependent upon the stats that you need to capitalize on. For instance, if I have a set in the game like this card set that I have here, and it's a veteran agent card, right? I saw somebody commented on one of the videos like, man, I heard the sadness when you rolled that for Wolverine. Yeah, because I didn't mean to. I meant to use this for freaking Doctor Strange. But what you're looking at, like this card, for instance, right? I've got the attack fixed effect, and then you see I've got defense pierce, which is going against the supervillain damage decrease that I have over here. The HP recovery stat isn't bad. I think for Wolverine's exclusive stats, depending on what you're going for, you're definitely going to want to have either the HP recovery, the cooldown decrease, or the defense pierce stat in there. This is going to largely depend. Like most players, I think at the upper echelons of the game are basically dealing with a couple of different card sets. You have a card set for PvP, you have a card set for PvE. So for instance, I think if you're going for the HP recovery, that has benefits to you overall. But when you get to the cooldown effects and stuff like that, that also has benefits to you overall. But then when you look at like the defense pierce, obviously defense pierce is going to matter more to you inside PvP than it is inside PvE. So be aware of that. So for that reason, you know how much I hate going those situational routes. Until I have enough cards for Wolverine, I'll probably go HP recovery as much as I can on the majority of his cards. Either that or cooldown decrease will serve me appropriately and have me happy, depending on how quickly I can get to either one of those stats being maxed out. So you can see over here, for instance, like I got Captain Marvel. She's just situated on a card. This card is not a good card for PvP. This would be a great card for PvE. This would be a great card for PvP because you can see I've got the PvP damage increase, the PvP damage increase. I've also got the dodge rate, which isn't bad. And then the exclusive stat, I've got HP recovery over here. So this is a great PvP card for me to basically put on his PvP build. I don't know why, but the game wants to give me these cards all the time. I seem to get Doctor Strange cards all the time. Now this one's not so bad because it has cooldown decrease as a fixed effect. We do need that cooldown decrease, but it also has the PvP damage increase on it and dodge rate. So this card essentially would be great inside a PvP set, right? That's where I'm basically going to look to basically utilize that card overall. Now, I rolled into a Lucky Star-Lord card, which is also one of those great fixed effects because it has attack. It gives me PvP damage increase and guard damage decrease on it as well with defense pierce. So again, unless you choose to re-roll this card because it has the PvP damage increase and the guard damage decrease, I want to be utilizing this card inside PvP stat rolls. So of my card deck, you can see I've probably got about 3 cards that basically need to be rolled inside a PvP build and not a lot of cards that basically need to be rolled into a PvE build. Basically looking around still for cards to get, and I've been trying to roll into some of the cards. I think I got this Iron Man card, and this is the perfect example of some stuff right here, right? So you can see I got the villain damage on this card, 9.2%. I've got the defense pierce, the crit damage decrease, and then the PvP damage decrease. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to have a villain damage card that's sitting inside here with that fixed effect and then have defense pierce and PvP damage decrease, right? Because I'm basically losing out on a stat. This is a card that I would want to re-roll so that way I get bonus stats that are hopefully beneficial to me in PvE and get an exclusive stat on here that is also going to be beneficial for me in PvE. So I would want this to be either HP recovery or cooldown decrease, and then hopefully something in the bonus stat to reflect those as well. You see what I'm doing here in terms of what I'm giving you? So you can even see I've got some of the Doctor Strange cards. Like I said, I have no clue why they keep giving me these cards, but they do. And you notice it's like supervillain damage decrease, and then I got more supervillain damage decrease and PvP damage decreases as well. doesn't align in the two. Like that super villain damage decrease, cool. That means that as a PvE card, I want to basically have PvE stats and PvE exclusive stats inside here, so that way I can make use of this inside a PvE deck. That's essentially what I'm looking down the barrel at doing, right? So that's essentially all of the stuff that you need to know about Wolverine in terms of his overview. Without going so deep, I hope to bring you guys some more of the good, bad, and ugly. Wolverine is a whole bag of the good and nothing the bad, nothing the ugly at all. You basically have enough skills inside of his kit to basically play around, Swift Strike, Adamantium Claw, or Evolved Hunter, debuff, or, you know, tank. You could do a lot with this character in terms of choice and how you build him, which is going to be largely dependent for some players on what did you get from the RNG selection. And if you got something from the RNG selection, the great part about it is there's enough to build for this character across the board. I think he's probably one of the most completed kit characters that we've basically had in this game since we've basically since it's basically been released. So that's really, really good news. So overall, really happy about it. Like I said, I'm still basically drawing down on the Omega cards, and I'm really hoping that I can get the Wastelanders or the X-Lives of Wolverine. If I don't get it from here, I'll probably try to headhunt it inside of the inside the workshop for the event. Maybe I'll get something here. Let's see what we get. Nothing there. I really want that damn card, but you know, game just like refuses to give it to me. They just don't want to give it to me. Mighty Thor card inside here, X Factor card, unfortunately, and like I'm now spending freaking crystals to try to get this card, and it's just not coming. And I'm like, come on, guys, give it to me, give it to me. I wanted to see like one of those gold cards like come up for Baby Groot inside here, but you know. If only. I could only get so lucky, but here we go. Nothing. All right. So you guys get it. You see what I'm saying here? So it gives me a Storm card. Storm card is great because, well, look, I'm not going to complain about this card. It's a 4-star PvP damage decrease. It won't keep the bonus stats, but it would be great if it kept it and a cooldown decrease on it. This is a great card for basically for PvP because I've got all of those stats aligned over here. Now you see 2 set effect of super villain damage, which is totally not in alignment with it, but hey man, it is what it is. Let's roll this one more time, see what we can get from it, and then I'll let you guys go. I appreciate you guys for sticking around. Until next time, peace.